The love they couldn't see *. Have you ever felt your heart break, not from loss, but from the quiet ache of being misunderstood by the very people you love most? Mark Thompson sat alone at a weathered oak table, the fading sunset spilling through the window in fractured streaks of gold and shadow. The light caught the silver threads in his chestnut hair, a silent record of the years etched into his life. His chin rested heavily on his hand as his gaze drifted into the empty space before him. But his mind was far from still. 4 relentless years of court battles flashed through his thoughts like a film he could never turn off. Tense hearings, sharp words from lawyers, savings drained nearly to nothing, all of it spent to protect the simple, sacred role of being a father. Yet the deepest wound was never the legal fees or the endless paperwork. It was the quiet, piercing truth that his own children no longer seemed to see the love that had driven every sacrifice. Emily, 16, once his little girl who used to fall asleep on his chest, now met his eyes with guarded frustration. Liam, 14, whose laughter had once filled the house, sometimes looked at him as though he were a stranger. A simple vacation trip he had imagined would bring joy and new memories had instead become a spark for arguments, a wedge driving them further apart in the stillness of the room. The clock ticked steadily, each sound a soft reminder that love alone isn't always enough. Sometimes, even when you give everything, the people you'd die for can't see the quiet sacrifices behind your choices. And as Mark sat there, shoulders heavy with doubt, one question pulsed through his mind like a heartbeat he couldn't silence. Was he holding on too tightly? Or was a father's love strong enough to outlast the choices his children had already made? Mark Thompson once believed he had found a fragile balance after his divorce. His 2-story home on the outskirts of Boston pulsed with life every week when his children arrived. Emily, 16, bright and fiercely independent, and Liam, 14, gentle and quietly sensitive. On Mark's custody days, the house lit up. Emily would sit at the kitchen table, animatedly describing class presentations and school gossip while Liam chased their little dog, Scout, across the yard. Winter nights found the 3 of them curled on the sofa beneath a shared blanket, old movies flickering on the TV as a bowl of popcorn passed from hand to hand. It wasn't a perfect family, but it was still a family. When Mark signed the 50/50th custody agreement, he felt a cautious pride. We may not be husband and wife, he had told Jennifer, his ex-wife, but we can still be parents together. Emily and Liam deserve both of us. For a time, it seemed to work. Schedules were clear. Love felt steady and indestructible. Mark believed nothing could shatter the quiet rhythm they had built. But peace, he would learn, is often only the surface of deeper waters. For years earlier, Jennifer remarried. Her new husband, David Reynolds, was everything a glossy magazine might admire: successful, charismatic, effortlessly polished. He drove a sleek car, wore tailored suits, and treated Jennifer to candlelit dinners in downtown Boston to Emily and Liam. David was exciting, a man who brought expensive gifts and an easy smile. The first time Mark met him during a custody exchange, he forced a polite handshake and a neutral smile, though something in his chest tightened with a chill he couldn't name. Months later, Jennifer sent an email that landed like a hammer. She wanted to revisit custody. According to Mark's attorney, David had encouraged the move. "The kids need a more stable environment," the email read. "Too much back and forth isn't healthy. They should live with me full time." That night, Mark sat in the dim kitchen, the glow of a single bulb outlining the deep lines of fatigue on his face. A vague fear hardened into reality. He was about to enter a war he never wanted. The battle began with letters and filings, then escalated into endless meetings with lawyers and judges. Mark poured nearly all his savings. $165,000 meant for Emily and Liam's college fund into legal fees. Late nights blurred into early mornings as he pored over thick folders of affidavits and court motions. Each visit to his attorney's office felt like carrying an invisible boulder on his shoulders. Papers, invoices, and case files stacked higher with every meeting. The smell of stale coffee and printer ink clinging to his clothes. Jennifer and David wielded their financial advantage like a silent weapon. Their team of lawyers stretched hearings, filed motions, and bled the calendar dry. Every court date left Mark feeling smaller, a lone figure against an army in tailored suits. Asterisk, the decisive hearing took place on a bleak late autumn morning. Boston's sky hung low and heavy, a lid of grey that mirrored Mark's own dread. He sat on a wooden bench in the chilly courtroom, the air thick with the scent of old varnish and paper. Across the aisle, Jennifer sat beside David, her expression calm but her eyes glittering with quiet resolve. The judge, silver-haired and unsmiling, presided with an air of distant authority. Each time Jennifer's attorney rose to speak, Mark's chest tightened. Questions, evidence, and carefully crafted arguments flew like arrows. Mark answered with measured words, but beneath the table his fists clenched until the knuckles whitened. Then Emily was called. She stepped forward in a pale blue dress, hair neatly tied back, her voice trembling yet steady. "I want to live with Mum," she said, "and only visit Dad every other weekend." The words struck like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt. Sound receded to a dull hum. Mark forced a small, encouraging smile as Emily stepped down, though his vision blurred with unshed tears. Liam followed. He began with a wavering plea for shared custody, then faltered, "Maybe." 70-30 with Mum, he whispered, eyes darting to Jennifer. I want this to be over." It was the final cut of a long, painful blade. The judge's gavel fell with a sharp, echoing crack. Considering the children's ages and stated preferences, the judge intoned, "Custody will be awarded primarily to the mother." The sound might as well have been thunder splitting the earth. Mark heard the words, but felt them more as a hollow vibration in his chest. When he stepped into the courthouse hallway, the fluorescent light seemed too bright, the corridor impossibly long. Outside, the bitter Boston wind whipped dry leaves into frantic spirals as he stood motionless, heart emptied of everything but ache. That night, Mark sat alone in the living room. The soft yellow lamp cast a lonely glow over a framed photo on the shelf. Emily's wide grin, Liam's paper airplane held aloft, Jennifer standing close. Mark's hand resting proudly on his children's shoulders, he traced the glass with a fingertip, remembering bedtime stories, whispered jokes, the warmth of tiny arms around his neck. Now those moments felt like artifacts from another lifetime. He felt no anger toward Emily or Liam. They were children, craving stability, desperate to avoid the tug-of-war. But a single question pulsed through his mind. Do they know? Do they know that every dollar, every sleepless night, every courtroom humiliation had been for them not to win against their mother, but simply to remain their father? The house answered only with the slow, relentless ticking of the war clock. In the days that followed, Mark kept calling. He texted. He sent postcards. He smiled when he saw them, even as a cavern of loneliness opened wider inside him. The legal war was over, but the emotional scars would linger, not only in Mark, but in the hearts of Emily and Liam as well. Still, he made himself a quiet promise. A court order can limit time, but it cannot limit love. Whatever the schedule, whatever the distance, his children would always know that their father had fought not to win, but to stay. In the weeks after the final custody ruling, life settled into an eerie stillness. No more frantic calls from attorneys. No more late nights buried in legal documents. Yet Mark Thompson's heart refused to unclench the two-story house outside Boston. Once alive with the laughter of his children, now felt like a museum of memories. Passing through the living room, Mark would glance at the sofa where Emily used to sprawl with a book, or the kitchen table where Liam once bent over math homework, Scout the dog sleeping at his feet. Their voices still echoed faintly in his mind, but only as ghosts of days gone by. Sarah, Mark's new wife, watched him with quiet worry. She had witnessed 4 relentless years of litigation, each grey strand threading through his hair. She knew he needed more than rest. He needed to breathe again, to remember that life contained colours beyond court filings and visitation schedules. One late March evening, winter still clinging to the New England air. Sarah set to steaming mugs of tea on the kitchen table. The soft yellow light caught the fatigue on Mark's face. "You need a real break," she said gently. "Not a weekend. A real getaway. My sister and some close friends are planning a trip to Europe, Spain, and France. You should come with us." Mark stared out the window. Flakes of snow drifted onto the back steps, silent and slow. Images of courtrooms, tense arguments, and the sight of his children walking away to their mother's car layered in his mind. A trip. The thought slipped into him like warm air in a frozen room. After a long pause, he nodded. "Maybe I really do need that," he said, his voice rough. Sarah squeezed his hand and began sketching the plan. 9 days of wandering through the sun-soaked streets of Barcelona, evenings along the Seine in Paris, dinners with her sister and a small circle of friends. No lawyers, no papers, just music, old stone walls, an air that belonged to no one. Mark listened, and for the first time in months, the heaviness inside him eased. He hadn't left the US since Emily was born. For 16 years, every vacation had revolved around school calendars and custody swaps. The idea of slipping away to a foreign city, no court dates, no exchanges, felt almost rebellious, almost young. Over the next weeks. The kitchen filled with travel books, folded maps, and scribbled notes. Mark practiced a few Spanish phrases, joking that he'd order tapas on his own in Barcelona. Sarah laughed, delighted to see a genuine smile, one not shadowed by worry, spread across his face. Yet even in these bright moments, a quiet ache remained. On the kitchen counter sat a framed photo of Emily and Liam, their eyes seeming to follow every packing list and flight confirmation. Whenever Mark's gaze lingered there, his heart slowed, heavy with a question. Would they think he was leaving them behind? Sarah sensed it. "Mark," she said softly, resting a hand on his shoulder, "you need this time. And they need time to adjust to the new routine. This trip isn't abandoning them." He nodded, but the knot inside him only tightened. Mark never intended to hide that Trippy simply didn't know how to tell them. He wanted to wait for the right moment, a time when Emily and Liam were steady enough to hear it without hurt. But secrets rarely stay secret in a shared home. One Saturday afternoon, the kids arrived for their regular weekend visit. Sarah was at the printer, flight confirmations sliding into the tray. A page slipped to the floor just as Emily stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water. She bent to pick it up. Her eyes widened. Barcelona? Next month. Mark froze, coffee mug trembling slightly in his hand. Before he could speak, Liam bounded in excitement, lighting his face. Wait, Barcelona. Are we going to Europe, Dad? The room suddenly pulsed with energy. Questions flew faster than Mark could breathe. Where else are we going? Can we see Disneyland Paris? How long? Do we need to miss school? Sarah's polite smile faltered as Mark's chest tightened. He had known this moment would come, just not like this. Mark set his cup down and drew a slow breath. Kids, this trip is something Sarah and I planned a while ago. It's an adult's trip. Sarah's sister, her husband, a few friends. Just the grown-ups. Emily's laughter stopped mid. Her brows knitted as she stared at the ticket in her hand. Just adults. But why? Dad, we can come. You always said you wanted us to see the world. Why wouldn't you tell us sooner? Liam, usually the calmer of the two, stepped closer. At least let us come this time. I can ask for school leave. I promise we'll behave. Mark's throat tightened. Every word felt like a blade. I wish you could, he said carefully. But this trip was planned from the start as an adult vacation. The flights are booked. It can't be changed now. The kitchen, once warm with afternoon light, turned heavy and airless. Emily's lips trembled. Liam stared at the floor, fists clenched around the paper. The only sound was the relentless tick of the wall clock dot. Emily broke the silence first. Her voice was sharp, but beneath it trembled hurt. Dad, you always talk about new experiences, and now you're leaving us so you can have them with your new family. Is that fair? The phrase new family sliced through Mark. He tried to speak, to explain that this wasn't a choice between worlds, but the words jammed in his throat. Liam's voice came next, quieter but no less painful. I thought you'd want us there. Guess I was wrong. Sarah started to say something, but Mark lifted a hand. This was between him and his children. No outsider could soften it. That night, dinner unfolded under a heavy cloud. Emily barely touched her food, shooting quiet, wounded glances across the table. Liam pushed potatoes around his plate, silent and tense. Mark watched them, helpless. He understood their disappointment. He too had once dreamed of showing them Europe, of walking ancient streets with their small hands in his. But this trip was different. It was the breath he needed after years of fighting to remain their father. He tried again, voice low and careful. Kids, I know this is hard. But you made a choice to live primarily with Mum. That means our time together is shorter, and sometimes I have plans of my own. This isn't punishment. It's just life. Emily's eyes flashed with anger and something deeper betrayal. So because we chose Mum, we get less of you. Is this our punishment? No, Mark said quickly, shaking his head. No, sweetheart. This trip isn't about punishing anyone. It's about me needing a little time to breathe. I love you both more than anything. But his words, however tender, only seemed to fan the fire. Emily shoved her chair back, footsteps pounding up the stairs, the slam of her bedroom door echoing through the house. Asterisk. When the house finally fell quiet, Mark sat alone in the living room. Sarah brought him a mug of tea, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You did the best you could," she said softly. "They just need time." Mark nodded, eyes fixed on a family photo on the shelf. Inside him churned a storm of love, guilt, and a flicker of anger he hated admitting. Anger that his children couldn't see the years of sacrifice behind this single trip. The clock struck 11, each tick a reminder that a deeper confrontation still loomed. Asterisk. The next morning. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen, but it did nothing to warm the air between them. Emily came down first, leaning against the counter, her voice cool and deliberate. "Dad, Liam and I want to talk tonight. We both have things to say." Mark met her gaze and nodded. He knew the storm wasn't over. Love, he thought, often has to pass through tempests before it finds its way back to shore. Sunday night settled over the Thompson house with a quiet so sharp that the ticking clock sounded almost cruel. Outside, an early spring wind hissed through the cracks of the windows, carrying a chill that slipped into every corner of the living room. The warm glow of the ceiling light pooled over the dining table, where Mark had carefully set 3 chairs, hoping to keep the atmosphere calm, a serious conversation. Not a battlefield. Emily and Liam sat side by side, their faces tight with unease. Sarah lingered near the kitchen doorway, fingers knotted together, her expression a fragile balance of worry and restraint. The 3 glasses of orange juice on the table remained untouched. Mark drew in a long breath and began, voice low but steady. "I know you're both upset about the trip. I want us to talk, really. Talk so we can understand each other." Emily met his eyes, her own sharp and bright, a spark of anger flickering inside. "Understand? What's left to understand when you've already decided everything?" The room instantly grew heavier, the air charged and tense. Asterisk. Emily shoved her chair back, the legs scraping against the wooden floor like a blade. "You just plan and decide, Dad. Liam and I only wanted a chance to experience something new with you. Did you even think about how we'd feel?" Beside her, Liam's eyes shone red, his small hands twisting the hem of his sweatshirt. He tried to hold back tears, but his voice cracked. We just wanted to go with you. Why can't we?" His choked pleas sliced through the room like a sudden wind. Sarah took a cautious step forward, speaking softly. "Emily, Liam, let's all take a breath. Maybe we can find another way." But Emily cut her off, her voice rising. "No, Sarah. This isn't just some little thing. Dad always says he loves us, but when it matters, he leaves us behind so he can have fun with his new family." The words "new family" struck like a blade, and Mark felt them land deep in his chest. Mark leaned forward, his voice slow and deliberate though his heart pounded. "Emily, Liam, I know you want to come, but you need to understand this trip has been planned for a long time, and you've chosen to spend most of your time living with your mum. Every choice has consequences. I also need time for my own life." Emily shot to her feet, tears glittering in her eyes, her voice sharp with pain. "Consequences? You call this a consequence? We only live with Mum more because of school, because of our friends, not because we want to leave you. You're punishing us just because we don't live here full time." Mark tightened his grip on the table edge, heat rising in his chest, but he kept his voice even. "This isn't punishment. I just need you to understand that life isn't always about immediate happiness. I fought for years in court so you'd have a stable life. But I'm human too. I need a break. For a long moment, Liam stayed silent, then finally spoke, his voice trembling. But we need you to, Dad. Not just on court-scheduled weekends. We want memories with you like other families have. Mark's breath caught. His gaze softened, but the ache in his chest only deepened. The room fell silent again. The ticking clock, loud enough to feel like a heartbeat. Inside Mark's mind, a storm raged. Am I being too strict? Am I doing exactly what the court warned me about, putting my own needs ahead of theirs? He longed to pull Emily and Liam into his arms, but feared that a single embrace might undo every word he'd just said. Emily stared down at the table, silent tears streaking her cheeks. The father she once believed could never hurt her now felt unreachable. Dad promised he'd never leave us. So why is he choosing a trip that doesn't include us? Liam's heart twisted in confusion. He wanted to understand his father, but a deeper fear was growing, the fear of being left behind. Emily finally raised her head, her voice tight but defiant. Dad, you keep talking about responsibility and consequences. But have you ever once thought about our happiness? Or is this just about control? Mark exhaled slowly, his words heavy. Your happiness matters to me more than anything. But life isn't about getting everything we want the moment we want it. I don't want you to grow up believing that's how the world works. Emily's voice broke into a near shout. This isn't about toys or treats. This is about being with you. Why can't you see that? Sarah stepped forward at last, her tone firm but pleading. Enough, Mark, Emily, Liam, you're hurting each other. Maybe we should pause and think about what each of you really needs. No one answered. Only the sound of their heavy breathing and the glint of unshed tears filled the room. Sarah's heart ached as she looked at the three people she loved. Mark the man fighting to stay composed. Emily and Liam too, brave. Wounded children desperate for proof of their father's love. She could see all their fears as if they were written in the air. Mark's fear of losing his place as a father. Emily and Liam's fear of losing unconditional love. Placing a gentle hand on Mark's shoulder, Sarah turned to the children. Maybe we can plan something else. A shorter trip this summer, just the four of us. It might not be Europe, but it could be something special for our family. Would you like that? Emily didn't answer right away, but the tightness in her eyes softened. Liam glanced at his dad, then gave a small, hesitant nod. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a crack of light breaking through the storm. Later, after Emily and Liam had gone upstairs, Mark remained at the table, shoulders heavy. Sarah rested a hand on his back and whispered, "You did what you had to do. There are no winners in moments like this. What matters is that they heard you and you heard them." Mark nodded, though his eyes lingered on the staircase leading to his children's rooms. The European trip would happen, but he knew the journey that truly mattered. The slow, painful rebuilding of trust was only beginning. The house felt frozen after the last words were spoken. Emily and Liam left the living room with heavy steps, their bedroom door clicking shut behind them. Only the slow, relentless ticking of the wall clock remained, each sound a reminder of the distance that now stretched between father and children. Mark sat motionless on the sofa, fingers interlocked so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes stared into the dim corner of the room, but what he really saw were the echoes of his children's voices, sharp, trembling, each word carving deeper into his heart. Every sentence they had thrown at him replayed like an unforgiving reel, tearing holes in the careful wall of resolve he'd built over years of custody. Battles and lonely nights. Sarah approached quietly and rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. She didn't speak at first. She simply sat down beside him, letting her presence become a quiet anchor in the storm of his thoughts. After a long silence, her voice came soft and steady, like a calming breeze. "Mark, you did everything you could. The kids just need time. And maybe you need time to understand them, too." Mark nodded faintly, the weight of her words sinking into his chest. He knew he had held firm to his principles, but the emptiness eating at him felt heavier than any victory. Upstairs. Emily and Liam sat on opposite sides of their small room, each hugging a pillow as though it could absorb the ache in their chests. The anger that had fueled their voices moments ago had already begun to dissolve, replaced by a heavy, aching sadness. Emily bit her lip until it hurt, whispering through broken sobs, "Why would Dad treat us like that? Doesn't he love us anymore?" Liam didn't answer right away. His eyes were rimmed red as he finally choked out, "Maybe he has a new family now. Maybe he doesn't need us." They cried until their tears ran dry. Images of the argument flickered in their minds, very sharp word, every raised voice until fear crept in, cold and merciless. Did we push him too far? Did we just push Dad away? As exhaustion settled in, memories returned like a flood of old film reels. Mark running behind Emily's wobbly bike, cheering her on with every shaky turn. Rainy afternoons when he carried Liam home from school, soaked to the bone but smiling anyway. Weekend dinners where he always made sure their favorite dishes were. Waiting at the table, Emily's mind wandered to those long, tense court hearings when Mark had never missed a single session, fighting tooth and nail just to remain in their lives. Her voice trembled with a quiet realization. If Dad didn't love us, why would he fight so hard to stay with us? Liam lowered his head, guilt rising like a tide. Maybe he just wants us to understand responsibility, and we didn't even try to understand him. In that soft darkness, both children began to see past their father's stern words. Behind the tough exterior was a man terrified of losing the very people he had sacrificed everything to protect. Monday morning arrived with a grey, restless sky. Emily and Liam rolled their suitcases down the stairs to return to their mother's house. They mumbled a faint goodbye, unable to meet their father's eyes. Mark forced a small nod, his throat tightening round the words, "Travel safe." "I love you." The door closed softly, leaving Mark alone in the quiet house. He lowered himself onto the sofa, staring at the empty space where his children had just stood. That night, sleep eluded him. He replayed every word he'd said, wondering if his rigid principles had cut deeper than he intended. At their mother's home, Emily lay awake, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Every choice has consequences." Liam, silent beside her, stared at the ceiling, caught between pride and an aching need to reach out. The next night, as the room settled into the steady rhythm of the ticking clock, Emily whispered into the darkness, "Liam, are you still mad at Dad?" Liam hesitated before answering softly, "I don't know. I'm just sad. I don't think he hates us. I think he's trying to teach us something." Emily turned toward her brother, seeing the glimmer of tears in his eyes. Her own anger wavered, replaced by a painful clarity. "Maybe we said things that hurt him. He's done so much for us." Even if he's wrong, we can't let it end like this. Liam nodded slowly, determination flickering in his gaze. Tomorrow. Let's go see him. I don't want him leaving on that trip thinking we hate him. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the quiet resolve of two hearts that had wrestled with guilt and love for days, finally understanding that their father's discipline came from fear, not indifference. Back at his house, Mark spent the following days pretending to work, but his thoughts never strayed far from Emily and Liam. Each evening he sat alone at the dining table, staring at the empty chairs, remembering the sound of their laughter, the gentle weight of Liam's head on his shoulder after a long day. He drafted text messages, then deleted them. He wanted to reach out, but feared a single careless word might push them further away. All he could do was wait and hope. Late one quiet afternoon, the doorbell rang. Mark froze, heart pounding. At this hour, who could it be? When he opened the door, his breath caught. Emily and Liam stood there, nervous, hesitant, but unmistakably his. Emily's eyes flickered downward, while Liam fidgeted with his hands. Emily, Liam. Mark's voice cracked. A mixture of shock and something dangerously close to a sob. He swung the door wide without a second thought. Come in, come in. The children stepped inside, carrying with them a fragile air of hope. Sarah appeared in the hallway, offering an encouraging smile but wisely staying back to give them space. Emily took a shaky breath, her voice trembling but determined. Dad, we came to say we're sorry. We thought about everything, and we know we hurt you. We know you just want what's best for us. Liam added softly, eyes glistening. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have yelled. We can't go on the trip this time, but we want you to have fun. And maybe, next time, we can all go somewhere together. Just us. Mark stood there, speechless, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and aching love. In a single step, he pulled them both into his arms, holding them as if to protect them from every pain the world could offer. Thank you, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm sorry too, for being too stubborn. I love you more than anything. Sarah watched quietly, her eyes shining as though witnessing a small miracle. The house, once heavy with silence, now hummed with a warmth that felt almost holy. When Mark finally released them, he kept a hand on each of their shoulders, unwilling to let the moment slip away. The living room glowed softly in the late afternoon light. For the first time in weeks, it felt like home again. Emily glanced around at the familiar space, every framed picture, every pillow on the couch, she each one a silent witness to the life they had built together. Her voice was gentle, but filled with a newfound understanding. Dad, we don't need an expensive trip to be happy. I just want to be here with you, to eat dinner together, to talk. That's enough. Liam nodded eagerly, eyes shining. I like the little things, the park, the backyard barbecues. I don't want you to feel lonely anymore. Mark felt a weight lift from his chest, replaced by a quiet, overwhelming gratitude. Years of courtrooms and late-night fears had hardened him, but now he understood. Love was not about rules or victories. It was about presence. He drew a deep breath, committing every detail of this moment to memory. I don't need anything more either, he said softly. All I need is to know that you both remember this. No matter what happens, no matter where life takes us, I will always love you, always. Sarah stepped closer, resting a reassuring hand on Mark's shoulder. The most important thing, she said with a warm smile, is that we can always find our way back to each other. That's what family means. A peaceful silence filled the room, but it was no longer heavy. It was the silence of healing, of hearts that had found their rhythm again. Mark gently pulled Emily and Liam closer on the sofa, letting them lean against him. The steady ticking of the clock blended with the soft sound of their breathing, marking not the end of a battle, but the beginning of something stronger. The upcoming European trip suddenly felt small, almost irrelevant. What mattered most was here, in this room, a father, his children, and a love resilient enough to weather any storm. That night, after Emily and Liam had fallen asleep on the living room couch, Mark sat quietly, watching them with a heart full of cautious hope. The soft glow of the lamp painted their faces in golden light, a gentle reminder that fatherhood wasn't only about protecting or teaching, it was about listening, waiting and loving with unwavering patience. He reached for Sarah's hand and whispered, "We're going to be okay. Our family is going to be okay." Mark knew there would be new challenges ahead, teenage years, disagreements, moments of distance, but he also understood something far deeper now. Love is not built on grand trips or expensive gifts, but on shared dinners, honest conversations, and the kind of embrace that survives even the harshest arguments. The lesson was simple, yet priceless. A family isn't one without conflict. It's the place where, no matter how fierce the storm, you always find your way back to love.